What's up, everybody? Good Monday morning to you, or afternoon, or evening, whatever day or time you're watching this. The intention, however, is Monday morning, as Bill Landis and myself, Jeremy Birmingham, break down the second watch of the Ohio State 45-12 win over Arkansas State. That's what we're doing on Monday mornings on the podcast daily. And we're just going to start diving in right there because, Bill, I think both of us watching the game on Saturday were like unsure what to make of it because the stadium, like the vibe, everything just felt kind of funky from the start. As you rewatched this game on Sunday afternoon after you watched the Birds pull off the dub, you're entering the rewatch in a different frame of mind, a happier place. What did you see this time around that you think was worth reiterating or rediscussing?
My biggest thing whenever I go to rewatch a game, or I guess the first question I try to ask myself, and I suppose I'll ask it to you too, is do you feel better, worse, or about the same as you felt coming out of the game watching it live? And you miss a lot, I think, when you watch it live, which is I think why you and I and a lot of other people like to do kind of these sort of exercises. I will say that I came out of rewatching the game maybe feeling slightly better than I did after watching it live. I'm not to say that I feel great. I don't think it was, the most electric performance that Ohio State has ever had, but I thought it was pretty good. I don't have any notes at all on the defense other than like corners tackle people and don't be as soft on the edges as they were at times. Otherwise, I thought it was a pretty good game from the defense.
Yeah.
And the offense can clean some stuff up for sure, but I thought it was an overall better performance probably than they had last week against Notre Dame. I know the caliber of opponent is not nearly the same, but in terms of executing things, yeah, well, maybe it is now. That's a good point. But in terms of executing things, I guess more consistently, I thought this was a step forward. So I don't know. I guess I'll pose the same question to you. Do you feel better, worse, or about the same?
I think about the same. I mean, I think that as you watch the defense, you realize that they really, especially when Ohio State had what we would consider the starters on the field, it was dominant on defense. I think there's obviously, and we talked about it a little bit on Saturday in snap judgments, but since nobody heard that anyway, I figure we should talk about it again. Denzel Burke doesn't look like the same player that he did a year ago, and I'm not entirely sure what's causing that. I don't know if it's just a situation where when you have a defense that looks extremely competent everywhere else, if there just always has to be one piece that is trailing, and maybe that's where he's at right now. I thought it was really important for Ohio State, and upon rewatching it, I think it was actually more important for Ohio State than even I thought it was on Saturday that they yanked him from the game in the second quarter when they did, and really took an opportunity to try to right the ship there. And I stop and I'm thinking, and I'm rewatching it, I'm thinking, man, if he would have picked off the ball that he had a chance to pick off in the second quarter, how much does that change the entire game for Denzel Burke? Because he had an opportunity for a pick, and you just wonder, for a defense that's playing extremely well, 1 touchdown in 8 quarters, they still don't have any turnovers that they've forced or been given. And both Notre Dame tried to give them one, and Arkansas State tried to do the same thing with a couple bobbled snaps and that kind of stuff. And you're not going to complain about the defense. It sounds nitpicky, but I guess as I rewatch it, what I'm wondering is how do you get turnovers to happen? Because these teams they're playing, Arkansas State is sort of given a blueprint. And Joshua Perry for the Big Ten Network, a former Ohio State linebacker, did a good job calling the game and saying, what Arkansas State did rolling out James Blackman and getting him to the edge and these quick outside passes, you're going to see a lot of that against this Ohio State defense moving forward. And I think you need to find a way to counter that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also trust Jim Knowles to do that. I think maybe the thing that Jim Knowles does the best is adjust to things, whether that's on the fly or in a game or a theme throughout the season. So I'm not too worried about that. I think Arkansas State did a good job of negating, I guess, some of the pressure that Ohio State's defense was putting on it. But I mean, still not in any way that I thought was overly concerning. That the turnover thing feels more like a statistical anomaly to me than anything else. Like Michael Mayer dropped the ball last week and just like it happened to bounce back to him, and Arkansas State put it on the carpet a couple times. Denzel Burke had a near pick. Cameron Brown almost had a pick. You should have seen Austin in the press box when it looked like Cameron Brown was going to get that pick 6. I believe it was in the second quarter. So there's guys in position. I think it's going to happen. Like Jim Knowles' defense is not at least historically, has not been a prolific takeaway defense. It's been pretty good. It's more about just getting stops, getting off the field on third down, kind of thing. But it does feel like they should have more than they have registered to this point, which is none. I do think they're going to come because the pressure they're putting on quarterbacks, and I know people might be concerned about the lack of sacks for some of the defensive ends too. Um, the push up front for me is like night and day from last year. I'm not concerned about the lack of sacks at all. Like Mike Hall's getting there, the linebackers are getting there because the defensive line's getting them clean. As long as someone is getting there, I don't really care who it is. And it's clear that Tyler Buckner and James Blackman in both these two games, I think were uncomfortable for the majority of the game, and that led to some errant passes too. So I think eventually that ball is going to go toward Ohio State's defender. So it's not something that I think people should be overly concerned about. But it is odd that it hasn't happened yet.
I'm not concerned at all about the pass rush. I mean, I don't care if you get sacks on the quarterback or if you don't, as long as you're accelerating his clock in the pocket, and the Buckeyes are certainly doing that. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't researched this, but it felt like in 2019, as good as that defense was, and they were the number 2 defense in the country statistically at the end of the year, that wasn't a defense that forced a ton of turnovers either. It was just a defense that played solid football and stopped team from scoring and stopped driving the ball. And I think if I had to choose between a defense that didn't give up points, but or one that gives up points but gets turnovers, I'd pick the one that doesn't give up points.
Yeah, I'd rather have 1 touchdown allowed in 8 quarters than any number of turnovers in 8 quarters. So there's different ways to be an effective defense, and Ohio State to this point has been plenty effective in my opinion.
As you watch the defense, one thing that stuck out to me was, and again, this is comparing and contrasting to what we saw the last 2 years. Obviously, the linebacker play has been night and day difference just in their aptitude as far as knowing where to be, the aggressiveness, the way that they're triggering on the quick pass plays, the way that they're filling holes in the run game. What I don't remember seeing in the last couple of years for Ohio State is free runners at the quarterback from the linebacker position.
Yeah.
And we saw it a couple times in week 1 with Tommy Eichenberg on Tyler Buckner. We saw it a couple times this week. Steel Chambers got one, just a free runner. Do you think that that's just simply what Jim Knowles is doing, moving guys around and offenses not being able to adjust pre-snap? Or is it just a matter of these guys are understanding the scheme at a higher level than maybe we anticipated them at this point?
I mean, probably some combination of both of that. I asked Steel Chambers about that after the game on Saturday. I said, what's it like to play linebacker and just like operate without a 320-pound offensive lineman on you nearly every snap, which is basically what their existence was last year. That defensive line just was not very good at all at keeping offensive linemen from getting up to the second level. And this year through 2 games, I think they've been excellent at it. So I think that's part of it. The other part is the scheme, I think, in the positions that Jim Knowles puts the linebackers in. He does a lot of stuff, or at least he has these first 2 games where he's had Tommy and Steele or Tommy and Cody Simon or whoever's out there kind of mugged up in the A gap, and he'll drop them out in the zone. He'll send one, he'll send both, he'll send none. And I do think that when you're an offensive lineman and you just see those guys in your face and you're not entirely sure what they're going to do, it creates confusion. And you saw that on Tommy's sack, I think, last week against Notre Dame. You definitely saw it on Steele's sack on Saturday when really no one touched him. Like, I think the line totally shifted away from him because they weren't sure who was going to blitz and who wasn't. And Steele's the one that got free and was the benefactor of that. So it's all those things coming together. But I do think the biggest thing is that the linebackers are playing fast and seeing things clearly, which was certainly not the case last year, and is why I think coming into the season, you and I and a lot of other people thought that Steele and Tommy were going to be in for big production type of seasons just because of the nature of this defense, and I think we're seeing that through 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, big picture, rewatching Ohio State's 45-12 win over Arkansas State, defense pretty good. I'm not going to complain about a lot. I think that there was the second drive, the drive in the second quarter with like 5 minutes to go that Arkansas State had, where they had a 2nd and 19. Ohio State had them backed up, and that's the type of stuff that a year ago you saw over and over and over. And that is a drive that kind of sticks in my head as far as one that I'd rewatch and say, boy, I don't know. And again, I mean, Austin's not on this show, so we're not going to talk about too much the which defensive linemen were out there on that series, but you get a little bit of a frustration when you have an opportunity at that point. It's a 17-9 game and you're like, man, you got to stop them here and get the ball back. And you have the double doink essentially with, trying to score at the end of the half. And Ohio State eventually did get that third touchdown. I'm sorry, it was 24-9 when that happened.
Yeah.
And you just start to go, man, how do you let that sort of stuff happen? But I guess it's just about growing. And that's why I'm not going to nitpick the defense too much. Offensively, I still feel like there's a problem with the running game. And I don't know exactly if it's a situation that the offensive linemen are just not getting enough push. My question, and this is, we go back to March, right? The first time we talked to Justin Fry. The question was, what is Ohio State going to do to make sure they get 1 or 2 yards in the middle of the defensive line when they need to get it? And I still don't feel confident that they can get that. If you look at Saturday's game, they ran the ball well just by statistics, but majority of the key big runs were outside. It was nothing in between the tackles. You had the help on a Egbuka 27-yard run. Arkansas State on the first play of the game kind of ran into each other to open up a big play for Trey Henderson. The first touchdown drive of the second half was the best I saw Ohio State's offensive line moving people. And that was the, couple of big, you had the long run to Egbuka, and then you had Trey Henderson 2 carries for 38 yards or whatever in the score. But I'm still concerned about how they're able to move people in the middle of the line.
I think it's a fair concern. Coming into the week, we were, Matt Jones was asked like a sort of a throwaway question about like, oh, what concerns you about Arkansas State? And like the kind of question you ask is you feel like you need to say the opponent's name during the week at some point. And Matthew Jones said, they're pretty aggressive shooting the gaps. And that actually did show up on Saturday. And I really don't think Ohio State's offensive line did a good job with it, like kind of ever. There were a couple of nice interior runs, like Trevion Henderson's 8-yard touchdown run was really well blocked. I thought he was basically untouched walking into the end zone, and then his longer touchdown run was well blocked as well, but that was outside, to your point. The interior run game just isn't clean. There have been some really clean runs, like stuff that I in both these games that I think has looked really good, but just not consistent enough. And regardless of a team's style preference, if Arkansas State wants to be aggressive in shooting gaps, like Ohio State's offensive line should be able to handle that. Yeah. They should be able to move people. And I don't know if maybe that was, it's a kind of a low juice game. It's not the biggest opponent in the world. Maybe you take your foot off the gas or just lose focus a little bit. But I agree that the running game left a little something to be desired, at least when it came to the offensive line play. I still thought Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams were pretty good. It was nice to see.
And Dallin Hayden ran really hard too.
He did. Yeah, he did. And it was nice to see them kind of make an effort to get the ball on the perimeter. I guess I will say that was one thing to me that was promising, is that like the interior run game was a little clunky, and Ohio State didn't like just start like ramming its head against the wall. It did change some stuff up. It ran that toss play a couple times to get outside. It ran a couple of jet sweeps to get the ball outside. So it can be cleaner for sure. And I think like Matt Jones, I think, has been pretty good in these 2 games, but otherwise, I would say that all the other 4 offensive linemen can be better in the run game, and there were some pass protection things too that I thought weren't great against Arkansas State. But I just don't know whether to chalk that up to like these guys aren't playing well, or this was a weird game and it's hard to be executing at your best in a game like this. I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a situation that in 8 quarters of football, we had the fourth quarter against Notre Dame where that offensive line was dominant and making their presence felt. And then there's the other 7 quarters that they've played that haven't felt that way. And so heading into a game against Toledo may not be a situation where you're going to get a true answer for that, but you have to get better, because the Big Ten schedule is right after that. And Wisconsin may have lost to Washington State on Saturday, but they're still going to be a team that tries to play bully ball up front. And Ohio State's going to need to have an answer and an ability to just kind of pound the ball when they need to. And this Big Ten schedule maybe doesn't look quite as tough right now as it did 2 weeks ago, but these teams are going to get better. Ohio State's going to have to get better too.
There were in the Notre Dame game, there were 4 runs of 2 yards or fewer, and one of those is a 2-yard touchdown run, so obviously that doesn't count. No negative runs in that game. Against Arkansas State, there were 6 runs of 2 yards or fewer and 4 negative runs. You don't like to see that number trending in that direction as the opponent gets worse. So I guess for now I'll chalk it up to maybe a lack of focus against a lesser opponent, but it's definitely something I'm on alert for, because I thought, and I think maybe we talked about this a little bit, I thought the way they played in the fourth quarter against Notre Dame was going to be like a springboard to, here we go, Ohio State's just going to start pounding the ball. This might be what this team's identity is, or at least there's more balance and it's more reliable running the football. And while the overall final statistics look fine, it certainly didn't feel or look that way against Arkansas State. So it needs to get better.
And Toledo has played two very subpar teams, but the Rockets are they've given up 10 points on the season, and their defense is coming in with some confidence, which is very unusual for Toledo. Defense is not really their forte. So it'll be interesting to see. I know that their defensive coordinator likes to do a lot of multiple stuff, and you'll see him try to get creative just to mess with Ohio State's, productivity offensively. We could break down a lot of things. Bottom line, I thought CJ Stroud played pretty well. I'm interested in your take on the 51-yard touchdown by Egbuka, because I know you like to break down some of these plays. It looked to me like Egbuka decided to change the route halfway through the play and realized that he got behind the linebacker and there was no safety in the middle of the field, so he just turned up, because I think that was supposed to be a crosser. And Stroud's throw was actually I think that was one of his worst throws of the day, because he threw it totally on the wrong side of where Egbuka was going, and he had the other shoulder wide open. I mean, Emeka's speed turned it into a touchdown, but I'm curious if you saw that play the same, or if there was any other play that sort of stuck out from a well, that didn't look right. I mean, obviously we can talk about the touchdown throws to Marvin. All three of them were fantastic throws. I'm interested in that one play with Egbuka, because I was like, that didn't look right, but it just sort of broke for a 51-yard touchdown.
Yeah, so after the game, Ryan Day said that, I asked Ryan Day about the tight ends, and he said, you know what, they want to try to get Cade Stover a little bit more involved in the passing game. And then before the game, Austin and I were talking to some people, and they were kind of saying the same thing. So what I actually think happened on that play, if you watch it, Emeka and Cade Stover sort of ran like a little bit of a switch concept, and Cade kind of went outside, crossed with Emeka, and then took his route up the left sideline. And I think Emeka was supposed to be a decoy on that play. I think the thought with that is, when they do that, the defenders are going to go with Emeka, but they didn't. Two guys ran with Cade. They were actually both kind of wide open, but two defenders ran with Cade, and Emeka was like in the middle of the field, and I think realized like, oh my goodness, like I'm all alone. Let me turn this route up. And I also think too, I'm reading maybe way too much into this, but it's the first thing I thought when I saw the play. I think CJ was surprised that Emeka was wide open too, and so like he had to recalibrate, I think, for what that play was designed for, get back to the middle of the field. And I think it was just let me get this out there real quick. Hopefully Emeka catches it, because if he catches it, he's going to score. But I don't think anybody involved in that play was expecting Emeka to be the one who got the ball. But it just so happened that Arkansas State had a little bit of a defensive breakdown there and left the more dangerous player wide open and sent two guys with Cade Stover.
Yeah, I mean, I would contend that Cade Stover is fairly dangerous. On the football field, Egbuka is probably more dangerous, but I just thought it was interesting, because it almost looked like CJ saw a wide open middle of the field and was going to run, and then all of a sudden was like, wait a second, this receiver is completely wide open, which is the thing people are like, hey, are you going to run or not? Let's shift gears here, and we'll try to find some sort of rhythm with this particular show, for future episodes of it. Players that didn't get talked about enough, guys that are doing stuff on Saturday. And I think you mentioned it on Snap Judgments. And I think people kind of took it in jest, but wow, Jesse Mirco has played two extremely good games for Ohio State as the punter. Ohio State's punted far more than I anticipated them punting in these first two games. But when you have a guy that's been consistently putting opponents inside of the 5-yard line, that changes things, especially with a new aggressive defense.
Yeah, he's been excellent. I'm trying to look this up now as we're talking, because last week they came out of the Notre Dame game as the number one team in the country in opponent starting field position, and I want to see where they are now. Still number one, and a major part of that is Jesse Mirco's ability to flip the field, and he's had to do it in big spots. Like it's weird. Like even thinking back to last week when Ryan Day punted on 4th and 3 from like midfield. In the moment, you're like, what is he doing? Like,
you mean from the 40?
You go for it from the 40. Yeah. Like, and probably still like fairly, I think you could fairly criticize that and saying you should go for with the offense that they have. But that was putting some trust in Jesse Mirco, and he delivered there, and he's been really good. I guess you give credit to the Gunners too for getting down there and downing the ball. But Ohio State's been really fortunate to have punters who've been really adept at doing that kind of thing prior to Jesse getting here. and it looks like he's kind of picked that up this year. So it's a weapon. It's a weapon you don't want to use a lot, but I think he does deserve a shout out for playing so well in these 2 games.
That's my choice for dude who played well, but we're not going to hear a lot about. Who's your choice? Don't name a freshman. We're going to talk.
No,
we're going to talk freshman flashing. Flashing freshman. Freshman who flashed.
Freshman flashed.
In a bit.
Yeah. I'll say JT Tuimoloau. And I think he played really well last week too. Like Mike Hall is deservedly getting a lot of shine, and he's had the production, and he deserves everything that people are saying about him. But JT's been really solid. I think really good on the run game, setting the edge. Was getting after the quarterback a little bit against Arkansas State. Didn't have a sack, but was really close a couple times. And again, like a guy that maybe he's not going to have a super productive season based just because of the defense, but is really important. And he had a play that I'm going to plan on writing about in my rewatch that's going to run on Rivals on Monday. It was a 3rd down run stop where he like hesitated to his right and then really, and this is a big dude. This is a guy who's 270 pounds. Quickly pivoted, like got skinny, turned his shoulders and split the guard and tackle, and then stopped the run play for I think a 5-yard loss to turn 2nd and 15 and the 3rd and 20. And Arkansas State had to kick another field goal. And it's like, he's a really strong guy, and I think maybe that's what you notice about him first. But man, he can move really well, and that was like, oh yeah, he's got some special skills to be able to do that too. So I think he's I don't know if he's flying under the radar because he's a 5-star guy people pay attention to and know about, but I think he's played really well so far.
Yeah, and he's not going to be a guy that has a big season from a statistical standpoint, but the impact that JT Tuimoloau has made in the first 2 weeks has been undeniable, and I think a lot of the guy that that is where Michael Hall is getting some benefit because he's being put in situations on the interior part of the line where he's kind of going one-on-one. I think Zach Harrison's in a similar mold. I know people like to nitpick Zach, but I think he's played pretty well both weeks. I mean, he's getting, the thing with Zach the last 2 years has been he's close all the time. He's so close.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just his way. That's how it's always going to be. The offenses that they play are expecting that, and they get the ball out quickly. Maybe he doesn't have that Chase Young extra gear that, takes that close to being a strip sack. But in this defense with so much pressure coming from all these different angles, just shutting off one side of the defensive line and forcing the quarterback to go the other way changes a lot. And I think he's played really well. And I also think Cody Simon played a pretty good game on Saturday for a guy that I think people want to, wonder like what his role is, or they'd like to see other guys play more often. But I think Cody Simon played a pretty solid game as well. So, and then Austin mentioned him. I mean, now I'm just going to list a bunch of guys. Josh Proctor played a hell of a game on Saturday. Josh Proctor played a great game.
Yeah, just like in the right spots, like nothing super flashy, but I think it was you who said, right, the job of the safeties in this defense is just sort of to be where you're supposed to be and make sure the play dies when it gets to you. And clearly that didn't happen last week when Josh gave up that 54-yard touchdown or reception on a missed tackle. But he was in the right spot more often than not against Arkansas State, had a couple nice plays. Seemed to be covering guys well too. So it was good to see that. I think it was good for him. I think it was good for the defense to see a guy not lose the buy-in that I think is so important here and then come back and play well after a rough week last week.
Right, because if Ohio State's going to win a national championship in 2022, it has to have guys who are willing and able to take constructive criticism from a new coaching staff and not turn it into a year-long problem. And so I think one of the most interesting things that I'm going to be watching coming out of this game is whether or not Denzel Burke takes the criticism the same way that Josh Proctor did in the last week. And if Tim Walton is able to express to Denzel Burke the message of what he did and why, the same way that Perry Eliano was able to do to Josh Proctor. So that's one of the little subplots I'm really paying attention to in this next week. Do we see Denzel Burke take the same step next week that we saw Josh Proctor take this week? So there's a lot of talk. You got something else? What else you want to say, Bill?
Are we doing flashy freshmen?
We got to do flashy freshmen. Yeah. I mean, I think we got to do some freshman flashing. The first one is obvious, I think, to everyone, and that's Caden Curry. And I wonder, and I'm wondering out loud, does Caden Curry, in your mind, have the ability to change what Jim Knowles is doing with this defense?
Seems like it. I don't want to make too much out of what are essentially our garbage time snaps, but he was out there for at least a little bit against Arkansas State starters and looked like he belonged on the field and was making a ton of plays. And I think a guy who plays with the motor that he plays with, like, just has a chance to be a contributor, whether that's lining up at end, playing the Jack or Leo. Maybe you can put him inside depending on matchups. I think he can, because there's, like, Mike Hall's been very good. I think the top three ends have been very good. Teron Vincent's played pretty well. There's room there for somebody else to be a contributor. And, maybe it's a guy like Tyleik Williams, or maybe it's a guy like Caden Curry who keeps, who takes this game and kind of keeps coming on and builds a little bit of momentum. But I really liked what I saw from him. I know you've been high on him, throughout his recruitment up until this point, but seeing him on the field on Saturday was like, okay, I see what Burnham's talking about.
Yeah, I think if you put a guy like Caden Curry with the engine that he has on the field at the same time you have Michael Hall, who has the same similar sort of just like nonstop motor, you can do a lot of things. And I mentioned this on Saturday afternoon because there's been, I don't want to be too harsh on guys like Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste and some of these other players that are trying to find ways to make an impact. If a kid comes on the field and makes plays, I think you have to keep the kid on the field. I don't care if it's in the fourth quarter. I don't care if it's in the second quarter. Caden Curry is going to make plays. And I wonder if the Buckeyes continue to get less results out of guys like Tyler Friday, like Javonte Jean-Baptiste, if there's a way that Jack Sawyer moves back to the traditional defensive end spot that he played last year, that opens up a door for Caden Curry to play more in that Jack role and do some more stand-up stuff, the way that Jim Knowles played in that spot last year with Colin Oliver at Oklahoma State. He had 13 sacks as a true freshman, and he was really just out there to go chase the quarterback. And as we're talking about the rewatch of this game, there's a play in the fourth quarter where Caden Curry, it's the last drive of the game after the punt return fumble, muff punt. He puts a spin move on a guy, and it was really special. Like special.
His get off's pretty good. Like I like watching his high school tape. You get a really good appreciation for just how hard he played, but it's hard to know whether or not the athleticism that you see will translate. And I know he played pretty solid high school football in Indiana, but it seemed like maybe it's going to. I don't want to get too far out in front. It's a 1 game sample size, but I guess my thought watching him play was, there have been a lot of defensive linemen who have been thrown out there, some of them who have played a very long time and been in the program for a while, who I think have never looked the way that Caden Curry looked at the end of that Arkansas State game. So
yeah, I mean, I agree.
I agree. If a guy looks like that, regardless of the time and situation, whatever, I think you need to reward him with a little more playing time.
Yeah, and it was good to see Ohio State find some time to get Kenyatta Jackson on the field, to get Omari Abor on the field, to get CJ Hicks on the field, to get Kai Stokes out there. Sonny Styles played some in special teams, but not on defense. I think that one of the missed opportunities in a game like this Arkansas State game and rewatching it is that you don't go out there and blow them out in the first half so that you can get these guys a lot of reps. But as you head into Toledo and as you head down the road with Rutgers and other stuff coming up, I think there's a lot to build on for the young guys. And I did mention earlier, Dallin Hayden, I was really impressed by the way he ran the ball. So often we see true freshman running backs come in and sort of look hesitant and get sloppy with the football in a part of the game that doesn't really matter because you're up by 30-some points. But I thought Dallin Hayden acquitted himself pretty nicely.
Yeah, and he caught a couple swing passes too, which I was kind of curious about maybe how that fits into his game. Ohio State doesn't throw the ball to the tailback a ton, but you want that as an option, I think. And he looks pretty comfortable doing that as well. So that was good to see. And then if I can mention one other guy, and it's I can't say that I watched him play and was like, wow, this guy really impressed me. But I just thought it was interesting that Tegra Shabola played with the second team offensive line as the right guard. It was a bunch of guys who've been in the program for 2, 3, 4 years, and then Tegra as a true freshman getting out there at right guard. And he's a kid who, when he first committed to Ohio State, I have to be honest, like I don't know that I saw the vision all that much, but I think he did a really good job of kind of changing his body and getting himself Ohio State ready. And I don't know what put him in that position to play right guard. Maybe there's some injuries there, but I was surprised to see that, and I thought it was good for him that he's kind of established himself in that spot so early on.
Yeah, Tegra's lost, I think, when I asked him a few weeks ago, he said he's lost close to 40 pounds since he got on campus. And that sort of physical change to a kid who's a super, super athletic offensive lineman, I don't know if it's because Josh Fryer just had on the 41 jersey and they're like, you're done for the day. If they're essentially accounting Josh as a starter on the offensive line and he's in the 41, so they don't want to change
Well,
his
he played
numbers.
right tackle. He was out there. He was playing next to Tegra.
I thought that was Ben Chrisman.
What number is Josh? let me back up. What number is Josh Fryer?
Well, is Chrisman 71 or is Fryer 70?
I thought Fryer was 70, but I'm gonna confirm that right
You
now.
might be right. So Chrisman's 71.
Yes, Fryer 70.
Okay, yeah. So then color my comment worthless. But I think that when you get out there like that and you're a big kid like Tegra is, you have a chance to prove yourself. And that's going to be interesting to see how Ohio State finds a way to get Carson Hinsman and George Fitzpatrick and even Avery Henry some opportunities to do the same this year, because even though that game is essentially over at that point, it still matters to these kids to get out there. And when you have the 4-game redshirt rule that's in place now, you may as well use it.
Yeah, this is a very nitpicky criticism, but Ryan Day has talked a lot about lost development time for a lot of young players in this program.
Yeah.
And I think he's too slow to get those guys into the game sometimes. They were up 45-12 when they put the first team offense back out there. Like I think all these guys we're talking about should have gotten at least the entire fourth quarter. They got most of the fourth quarter, but I think in a game like that, you can even push it into the third quarter. Like it's 38-12. I get that it's not a runaway. You're in no jeopardy of losing that game. And if we're going to talk a lot about lost development time from a couple of years ago, then I think when you presented the opportunity to put those guys in the game, you have to do it.
Yeah, it seems like there's always this desire from Ryan Day to be like, one more drive for CJ, just one more. Let me get one more touchdown drive out there, and then almost inevitably, that one last drive doesn't lead to points, and it doesn't look good. It looks sort of like, why are we out here? Because you can almost tell that CJ Stroud himself is like, why am I still out here?
He dropped the snap on the first play out there on his last drive.
So I totally agree. I think at that point, you just have to say, this one's over. Let's get these guys out. I think back to the Justin Fields play. What game was it a few years ago where he had no business? Was it Indiana?
When he got hurt?
Yeah, where he had no business.
State. It was
Penn State. Where the game's over and you have him out there and he's just running around and you just like, why do that? So I think that everything about this season rides on the arm of CJ Stroud. And boy, I just think you need to get some real reps for Kyle McCord, who looked fine in his time out there. And that's the last thing I want to talk about in this rewatch, because I think it's important that people understand, if you put a backup quarterback on the field with a backup offensive line and backup wide receivers and a freshman tailback who's never played, and the play calls are designed to be intentionally milquetoast and boring and bland, he's not going to look like the quarterback of the future.
He only threw 4 passes.
Right. But it doesn't mean he's not. It doesn't mean he's not the quarterback of the future. And I know that people want to see Kyle McCord go out there and just, be this big-armed, pride of the Philadelphia, whatever league. But man,
Catholic League. That's right.
I would just caution people to say, let's see Kyle McCord in a like-to-like situation before we make any sort of judgments about where he's going with his future, because the kid is extremely bright and is going to be an NFL quarterback, period.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you could have watched that performance on Saturday and came away with like any opinion because certainly a negative one. Yeah. I don't know how you could have that. He threw 4 passes. 2 of them were swing passes. I guess the one was low that Xavier Johnson caught. And I actually can't remember what the 4th one was.
Well, the one what was ironic, what was weird about that play is that Arkansas State didn't cover the wide receiver, and so Kyle was trying to hurry up, and so he snapped it and just tried to like run and throw a quick ball because there was nobody covering Xavier Johnson. So I think if you ask Kyle, like, if there's one throw you'd like to have back, it's probably that one, because if he just would have thrown a good ball there, it might have been a touchdown.
Yeah, I wish that. I guess that goes back to my point though about getting those guys in earlier. Like if you put Kyle McCord in the game in a third quarter, maybe he gets 2 drives of running the real offense before what we saw from him on Saturday on his last possession.
Yeah, there's a lot we can take away from these rewatches. There's a lot we try to take away from the games as they happen, but boy, it's important to get home and throw that thing back on the tube and catch it from there. Bill, anything else from Ohio State 45, Arkansas State 12 that you want to talk about, or should we say goodbye?
I think we can. I'll just. I think I said this on Snap Judgments, but in case people didn't hear it,
they probably didn't.
I will say. We apologize for that.
And we did our best. Look, I'm going to interrupt you. You can finish this out. I have to say this, folks. When something breaks, the decision was put up something or put up nothing. We decided to put up something, and
right.
It maybe was the wrong call. I don't know, but we're just trying to make sure that. We're trying to be as consistent as possible. So thank you for your patience and our apologies. Anyway, go ahead.
The point that I made then that I will make again is that I thought the tight ends had a nice day. Cade Stover had that long reception on like a wheel route. I thought he blocked really well. I thought G. Scott had some nice moments blocking as well, which was probably the most promising thing because I think G's interesting but they can't get him on the field, I think, if they don't trust his ability to block. And I thought he did a nice job when he was out there, helped spring the long touchdown run by Trevion, had another nice block on a I think it was also a Trevion like pitch to the perimeter. So it's good for them. They're going to get Jackson Smith and Jigba back and probably Julian Fleming. It's possible we see both those guys next week. So I don't know how much 12 personnel we'll see moving forward, but I like the idea of being able to play some different styles of 12 personnel when you're deciding whether or not you're going to put Mitch Rossi or G. Scott or Joe Royer, if you can get in the mix out there too.
And you know what I liked about G. Scott is that all the work he's done in the last year to turn his body into more of a tight end body. In that fourth quarter, he was lined up at wide receiver. And in a situation where Ohio State needs some depth at wide receiver, it probably cost me a bold prediction. I mean, forgetting that they could just move him there instead of playing restock deal, but whatever. I can't be perfect. And I certainly am going to continue to be as bold as I can, but that's the way it works.
I don't know if any of us got a bold prediction right.
That's why they're bold predictions, and I think one of my favorite things is reading the responses to the bold predictions. People go, "Oh, you got that wrong, dummy." Well, like, yeah, it's meant to be, egregious. And it is oftentimes.
It's fun.
Extremely.
We're just having a good time.
And unbelievably, the 1 week Austin doesn't predict a punt return for a touchdown, Emeka Egbuka houses one, and then it gets called back. But, it is what it is. So.
Yeah.
That's it for me, Bill.
That's it for me, too.
Okay. That's Bill Landis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. This is the Podcast Daily. We will have a live show from Roosters on Monday, and then we'll be back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Tuesday. And, of course, we'll be back for the Podcast Daily on Tuesday morning as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.